Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service on this Sunday, December 11th. We have a lot to talk about with this major winter storm that's going to impact southern portions of the state and northern panhandle. Quickly, though, if you'd like additional weather information on top of what I provide, you can go to weather.gov. Click on the map of Alaska there down to the lower left, and it'll bring you up to the various forecast offices, Juneau, Anchorage, or Fairbanks, and you can get more detailed info on this winter storm. Meanwhile, the rest of the country, lower 48, we have a winter storm moving out of the western interior mountains. I spoke to my brother who lives up north end of Lake Tahoe there. They've had over 2 feet of snow he had to clear up in the mountains, 4 to 6 feet of snow. That system's going to push low pressure out into the central plains, and as a result, we have widespread winter storm warnings and advisories in through areas of the Rockies and winter storm watches there in the northern plains, even blizzard warnings being issued for parts of eastern Wyoming and northwestern Nebraska. But here, major winter storm is currently working its way through south central parts of the state, especially the Kenai Peninsula. Now and through Monday morning, as the system will be spreading further north and eastward and get across the Alaska Range up to about Fairbanks and the middle upper Tanana Valley, and then across the northern panhandle late tonight into the day Monday. This will result in high avalanche danger in the Chugach Mountains, so if you have any thoughts about doing some backcountry recreating, skiing, snowmobiling, just be aware of that fact with these couple of recent big heavy snowfalls. And we're going to stay in an active weather pattern across the southern mainland this week. There's going to be yet another system move across the southwest and south central Tuesday, and then we're keeping an eye on a very moist and potentially milder system that could impact the same areas Thursday into Friday. As of early afternoon, Kenai reporting heavy snow and fog, 23 degrees. Anchorage, roughly around 1:30 when this image was captured, had increasing light snow, a temperature at 19 degrees as viewed from Merrill Field camera. And then Whittier, some moderate snow and fog, temperature at 32, while further east at Yakutat, light snow and fog, but the snow will become heavier there as we go through this evening and especially overnight tonight. Well, the hazardous weather map is lit up like Christmas. We have I'm going to try to step through this carefully. We have up there around Galena a winter storm warning in effect till midnight this Sunday night. That's kind of for this system as it's moving eastward. That'll be the tail end of it. Also there across Dillingham, King Salmon, there is a winter weather advisory, but again, the bulk of the snow with that system is the one now impacting the Kenai on up through the Anchorage Bowl, especially the lower Susitna, Matsu Valley into the Copper River Basin, where we have winter storm warnings. They'll continue overnight and into Monday, at least through the morning, and in some cases further east, it'll last until through the afternoon into the early evening. And then we see the winter storm warnings for Yakutat, as well as the eastern interior along the Alcan border that includes Eagle and Northway. And then finally, we expect that snow to move into the northern panhandle, accumulating snows there later tonight and through a good portion of Monday into Monday afternoon. So rather extensive coverage here for this particular system. Also, there is a flood advisory that's been issued for ice jam flooding on the Willow Creek watershed there and through the Matsu Valley as a result of ice jams causing fluctuation of water levels there, and that's anticipated to be a problem through at least the middle of this upcoming week. Let's go on now and look at snowfall potential. Anchorage Bowl, 8 to 12 inches, pretty likely. There could be locally higher amounts if a band can set up and just kind of sit in one place for a few hours. And also heavier snow like that, 8 to 12 inches up around Palmer, Willow, down through the western Kenai Peninsula. Some of the heaviest snow is going to fall in through the eastern Chugach Mountains, especially surrounding Prince William Sound. Locally, over 2 feet of snow could fall in the higher elevations. Valdez, 12 to 18 inches, as well as McCarthy. As you go further north, you can see there areas east of Glen Allen, well over a foot. So this will be a decent snowfall on top of what we already had. And now as the snow moves east, winter weather advisories have been issued to include Gustavus, Elfin Cove, Pelican, 4 to 6 inches of snow expected later this evening through noon Monday. And then as we go east, areas that include Haines and Juneau, 4 to 6 inches of snow expected, maybe as much as 5 to 7 around Juneau before some rain mixes in and changes over to rain Monday evening. But again, this will be kind of a messy system there for the northern panhandle. Here on the satellite imagery, you can see the enhanced cloud tops, the stream of moisture coming out of the North Pacific on up through the northern Gulf. We currently have low pressure at this time located near Kodiak Island, and the low is going to continue to track northeastward. It's not an especially deep low pressure system, but it has a lot of moisture to work with. Plus, we've had some pretty cold air entrenched across south central interior, so the precipitation is going to fall as snow with the exception of mainly right at the coast. So here's the low this afternoon. As it tracks northeastward, it will remain off the Kenai coast early Monday morning and then be located there just southeast of Prince William Sound with a frontal band pushing into the panhandle, bringing in the little milder temperatures and changing the precipitation to rain on the outer portion there of the panhandle. And then we have another low coming up through the lower central bearing that's going to be pushing on up into the southwestern coast, and as a result we have a blowing snow advisory for Monday night into Tuesday morning along areas of the southwest coast there, especially surrounding Kuskokwim Bay. And by Tuesday afternoon, that low pushes inland with still a weak low lingering there just southeast of Prince William Sound. There's going to be yet another low and another push of moisture come up that could bring a round of more significant precipitation to areas of the southwest and south central Thursday into Friday. So stay tuned to later forecast. Temperature-wise, Monday morning lows generally below freezing and through the panhandle, certainly in through south central. High temperatures on Monday afternoon will get back up above freezing across the middle and outer channels there of the panhandle, and areas like Seward down toward Homer near and just above freezing, 36 at Kodiak, but below freezing up there through the Copper River Basin and the Susitna Valley. Low temperatures could be down near zero Tuesday morning there to the northern part of the south central interior, but generally remain above freezing there in through the panhandle. Could be pushing 40 at Craig and Metlakatla, but back toward the west, still chilly, only 20 for a high in the Anchorage Bowl, but 40-ish there as you get down toward Kodiak. Now, there is no data, unfortunately. Once again, today we had a problem with the data reaching the system here by which we could display it, so nothing there to the north, but if you live in the far north, it's going to be getting colder. Temperatures this Sunday afternoon have been sub-zero north slope, eastern Arctic coast, but we expect that area up there in the far north to remain mainly sub-zero here going in through the early part of the week, especially Tuesday into early Wednesday. For the southwest, though, we have chilly temperatures across the southwest interior as winds are going to go more northerly, but still readings for Monday afternoon could be back up into the 40s as you tail out across the Alaska Peninsula into the Aleutians, and then Tuesday morning, colder air wrapping in around the low, so we could see some readings near and below zero in the upper Kuskokwim Basin, and as you creep up there, the Yukon River, and then temperatures Tuesday afternoon could still see some readings 40 plus as you go southwestward from Kodiak down along the length of the Alaska Peninsula. And a quick check of the temperature forecast for December 17th through the 21st. We expect temperatures to average below normal across areas of the eastern interior along the Alcan border, and especially in through the northern half or two-thirds of the Panhandle. Further to the west, temperatures may average a bit above normal, especially from south side of Norton Sound down through Bethel, Dillingham, and across the Alaska Peninsula. Precipitation is expected to average below normal for a change across areas of the central interior, and especially across the Panhandle. Well, precipitation could average a little above normal there across the southwest and Alaska Peninsula. But as I mentioned, this weather pattern will be rather active in the week ahead here for southwest, south central Alaska going in through Tuesday and especially later this week.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Here's your aviation weather for early this week. Monday and Tuesday, we continue to watch a significant winter storm push its way eastward across the mainland into the Panhandle. Low pressure situated for Monday afternoon. We expect it to be just southeast of Prince William Sound with an area of snow extending up through the central eastern interior, as well as spreading into the Panhandle with widespread IFR conditions and lower ceilings areas, lower visibility. Now, conditions will be improving as we go through Monday, especially the latter half of the morning and into the afternoon across the Kenai Peninsula and areas back toward the southwest. But for areas across the east, southeast interior and in through the Panhandle, expect conditions to deteriorate there. Monday afternoon, IFR conditions widespread from just east of Fairbanks down along the Alcan border through the Copper River Basin, Yakutat, and into much of the northern two-thirds of the Panhandle. There's another area of low pressure that's going to take shape out over the lower central Bering Sea. That low will be tracking east-northeastward, crossing Nunavik Island by the time we get into Tuesday, and ahead of it, the frontal band will have more IFR conditions along with breezy conditions and precipitation pushing into the southwest coast as we go into Monday night and early Tuesday, and you can see widespread IFR conditions there, especially from the west side of Norton Sound, lower YK deltas across into Lake Iliamna and back across portions of Kodiak Island. We still see, though, IFR conditions lingering across areas of the Panhandle Tuesday morning, with some improvement in the southern Panhandle by Tuesday afternoon, but still IFR conditions are anticipated to linger along areas of the Gulf Coast, eastern Kenai Peninsula, even south side of the Alaska Range, with that moisture pushing further inland up through the southwest interior on the west side of the Alaska Range Tuesday afternoon. Now, we do expect IFR conditions to persist Monday, Anatuvik Pass as well as Adigan passes on the south side there of the Brooks Range. Lake Clark and Merrill will see MVFR conditions give way to VFR conditions with some downslope flow on the backside of that low northwest flow and conditions drying out. Rainy Pass IFR early Monday in the morning there, giving way to VFR conditions. Windy Pass IFR conditions Monday morning, giving way to MVFR conditions, and further east Isabel as well as Mentasta passes IFR, with the bulk of that south central system pushing eastward. And as we go further south and west, Tanita Pass, including the Copper River Basin, IFR conditions are expected on Monday in areas of low ceilings, visibility, and falling snow. Portage should see IFR conditions improve to MVFR as we get into Monday afternoon, and Chilkoot and White and much of the Panhandle and northeastern Gulf Coast will be socked in with IFR conditions as that snow and precipitation along a frontal band work their way through. Freezing levels are highest out over the lower Gulf. They come up as high as 8,000 feet to 10,000 feet well to the southeast there in the northern part of the North Pacific. We do expect freezing levels to be around 2,000 feet aloft there along the northeastern Gulf Coast and back out toward the central western Aleutians. Icing potential will be greatest from areas of Prince William Sound to along the northeastern Gulf Coast and western outer northwestern Panhandle above 4,000 feet. An area of above 3,000 foot considerable moderate icing expected there in the lower Bering Sea and through the eastern Aleutians and the tip of the Alaska Peninsula, in association with the next low that is going to be impacting the southwest coast, especially later Monday night and into Tuesday morning. Upper level winds at 30,000 feet, a jet core in excess of 100 knots from the southwest there and through the northern Panhandle up into northwest Canada, and then 125 knots out of the west, northwest, south of the central Aleutians. 700 millibars, 9,000 feet. We see strongest winds coming in there through the northern Panhandle, southwest 60 knots, and an area in excess of 70 knots along and south of the eastern half of the Aleutians. And then finally, 3,000 feet, we see low pressure circulation in northern Gulf, but then that next low with some stronger winds moving on in through Nunavik Island, Toland Strait down through the lower Alaska Peninsula, and we expect widespread considerable moderate turbulence along areas of the Gulf Coast, as well as the west side of the state, the southwest interior, extending along the Alaska Peninsula on out through the Aleutian chain.
So that Galena flood back in 2013 was at the intersection of weather and climate. Rick, I often get questions about the difference between weather and climate. How do you distinguish between the two?
Well, that's a really good question, John. One of the analogies that I like to use, the wardrobe analogy. So in my closet, in my dresser, I've got clothes appropriate for 90-degree weather and 50 below weather. That's the climate part of my wardrobe. But what I'm going to put on today, am I going to wear my Hawaiian shirt because it's going to be a hot July day, or am I going to wear my bunny boots because it's going to be 50 below? That's the weather part of my wardrobe.
You know, there's another interesting analogy. I've heard it said that climate is like your personality, whereas weather is like the mood you're in today. It's like that old John Denver song. Some days are diamonds and some days are stones. That's how weather works.
Of course, it's really a continuous range. Just as the Galena ice jam flooding was the result of a weather event, that ice jam, up against that cold spring, a climate event. So too with less impactful events. For instance, a daily record high temperature is a weather event, one day's high. But we put that in a climate context, say comparing to a century or more of individual temperatures on a given date.
So these extreme events like record high temperatures also happen on the seasonal time scale. Just in the last few years, we've had what was called a marine heat wave in the waters south of Alaska, the Gulf of Alaska and the Bering Sea. But the water temperatures in that area set new records in 2015 and 2016.
And most Alaskans are acutely aware that big wildfire seasons are becoming more and more common, most recently in 2015, and the frequency of million-acre seasons has doubled since the early 1990s.
Just this past winter, we had another event in the Bering Sea. The ice extent in the Bering was lower than it had ever been in the last 150 years. That's about as far back as the good records go. There'd never been another year like this one in the Bering with so little sea ice. That had major impacts on the communities along the west coast and the northwest coast.
So, John, what have you been hearing from folks around town about these kind of climate extremes?
I've heard from a number of people who've been here a long time that winters just aren't what they used to be. The average temperatures are higher than they were back in the 1960s and 1970s, and we just don't get the extreme cold days, the days down in the minus 50s or even the minus 60s that we used to experience in Fairbanks back in the, say, the 1960s, 1970s, and even into the 1980s.
Well, and it's not just winter either. 2016 and 2017, the summers brought unusually muggy, humid weather to Fairbanks. We're not used to thinking of that in interior Alaska, but record high humidities during the summer months. As in the winter, we've had a significant increase in freezing rain events, since about 2000. So much so that DOT has changed their road treatment strategy, and now we have the school district building in winter rain days into the calendar. And of course, we all need good weather forecasts for these high impact weather events.
We know, though, that weather forecasts are sometimes wrong just 3 or 4 days in advance. So if these weather forecasts and the models they're based on can't pick up events like freezing rain 3 or 4 days ahead, how can we believe what they say about climate for the future?
Well, that's a really good question, John. And I think the important thing to remember is that parts of the system are predictable.
So climate models can't give you weather for particular days or even for particular months or years. They actually predict averages. These are averages over periods of a decade or two, or even averages over periods of several years. So they don't give us the month-to-month information that we might want. What are they telling us about the future, though?
Well, these climate models are telling us on the decades-long time frames that warmer winters are going to become more common. We're going to have more frequent, very low sea ice years with late freeze up and early melt out. And the same will be true on Alaskan rivers. We'll have more frequent seasons when freeze up is late and break up is early.
One of the other common threads in these climate model predictions is that heavy rain events and heavy snow events will become more common in the future. That's actually a prediction that the models make for mid-latitudes as well as for high latitudes in areas like Alaska. So we can expect the heavy downpours to become heavier and the heavy winter snows to become heavier than we've been used to. They're also predicting more frequent freezing rain events, getting back to what you talked about earlier. These events that might have happened just once every year or two in the past could actually end up happening several times in a winter in the future, according to the climate models.
And it is important to remember that even in a warming world, there are still going to be seasons and years that are colder than the average, but these cold seasons will become less and less common. So, John, maybe I don't need to have those bunny boots in my closet anymore?
Well, at least you won't need to wear them as often as you did in the past.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back, and let's go with the Sea Ice Edge to start this marine segment. Of note, we have still a fair amount of open water there. That's unusual for this time of year in the lower Chukchi Sea down through the Bering Strait. Other than that, plenty of ice in place along the Arctic coast, and areas further south, we see the ice that is in place there across Norton Sound and then along areas of the YK Delta, though it has broken up a bit there along the lower Yukon Delta, and then rounding up through portions of Bristol Bay and even up through the far north and northeastern portion of Cook Inlet. But the main weather feature is the current storm that's working its way. We have a low pressure this Sunday afternoon located over Kodiak Island that will ride northeastward to just southeast of Prince William Sound. So ahead of the system, southeast winds to 30 knots across the inner channels of the Panhandle on Monday. Waves generally running 6 feet. Outer coast, 30-knot winds south of Sitka. They're southeast 40 to 45 knots, Gustavus, west of Gustavus and Yakutat, with waves of 18 to 20 feet. And then on Tuesday, winds do come down, inner channels 15 to 20 knots from the south, waves 3 to 4 feet. And then along the outer coast, we expect south to southeast winds 15 to 20 knots and waves generally running 11 to 12 feet. Now in the northwestern Gulf, the low is going to track up, as I mentioned, to be located just southeast of Prince William Sound Monday afternoon. So the circulation around the low will place westerly winds there at the entrance of Cook Inlet, 45 to 50 knot storm force winds out of the west with waves of 14 to 17 feet. Meanwhile, southeast winds there and through Prince William Sound to 30 knots with waves of 6 feet, and winds turn more northwesterly there, upper Cook Inlet 10 knots, 2 feet there near Anchorage and Turnagain Arm. For Tuesday, we have winds that'll be generally westerly to 30 knots off the Kenai coast with 13-foot waves. Still southeast winds 25 knots Prince William Sound. And then trying to turn back around to the south there at the entrance of Cook Inlet to 30 knots with waves of 8 feet. Across the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, winds are going to become more west to northwest, 35 to 40 knots. Waves running 14 to 17 feet on the North Pacific and Gulf side, 9 to 10 feet on the Bering Bering and Bristol Bay side. And then for Tuesday, with this next frontal system, rather breezy conditions, turn winds back around more to the southwest and south, 35 to 40 knot gales. Waves running 16, 17 feet on the North Pacific side and 17 to 19 feet as you get away there on the north side of the Alaska Peninsula in through the Bering side. Across the Aleutian chain for Monday, look for southwest winds veering, or I should say turning back westerly, 40, 45 knots across the chain, and waves running 18 to 21 feet on the North Pacific side and 13 to 15 feet there. And once you get into the open waters, away from the protection of the islands there on the Bering side. And then for Tuesday, winds will generally be out of the northwest to even northerly at times, 35 to 40 knots, and waves running 14 feet or so south of the Aleutian chain and 14 to 16 feet on the north side there and through the lower Bering. Across the west and southwest coast, low pressure will be situated just to the west northwest of St. Paul, 35 to 40 knot south-southeast winds ahead of it with waves running around 10 feet. Ice data is missing up there as you get north because of the data problem with the Fairbanks office. So Norton Sound, ice in place, 20 knot southerly winds, and then for Tuesday, look for winds to turn northerly, 25 knots there in Norton Sound with the ice still in place, but kind of a mixed bag of winds as high as 40 knots there off of Kuskokwim Bay with waves as high as 20 feet. And then finally along the Arctic coast, again, the ice data is missing. We'll hopefully have that back tomorrow. 20 to 35 knot winds out of the east, highest there near Kaktovik. And then as we drop down through the lower Chukchi Sea, south to southwest winds to 30 knots, becoming more westerly as you pass south of the Bering Strait, where there is open water, waves 8 feet. And then on Tuesday, winds will be out of the south, 15 to 20 knots along the Arctic coast. Lower Chukchi Sea, look for winds to have a westerly component at 15 to 20 knots, turning more northerly through the Bering Strait on the north side of St. Lawrence Island, with waves running around 7 feet. So overnight into early Monday morning, low pressure will be situated off of the Kenai in the western Gulf and then located just southeast of Prince William Sound Monday afternoon as the next low moves across the central and lower Bering, pushing a frontal system toward the southwest coast.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.